Hi, and welcome to today's math lesson. Before we get started, make sure you checked your homework on pages 8 and 9 with the answer keys that I posted. When you complete today's assignment, be sure to hit the like button underneath the video. For today's lesson, we will be solving quadratic linear systems algebraically. Open up your Unit 14 packet to page 11. On page 11, take and copy down these steps. If you don't have enough room on page 11, you can also use the back of your front cover. You may need to pause your video in order to take and copy down these notes first. Now for question number 1. On question number 1, the directions say to solve each system of equations algebraically. The first thing you need to do is to make sure both equations are set equal to y. In this case, that is already done, so we can move on to the next step. Even though the directions say to solve algebraically, I still want you getting the answers from the calculator first. So on your calculator, you will be typing in y1 equals x squared minus 6x plus 5. y2 is equal to 2x minus 10. Second trace intersect to get your solutions. Once you get the solutions, you will take and write them down on your paper first. Pause the video and get your solutions now. For your solutions, you should have gotten 5, 0, and 3, negative 4. Again, even though the question says to solve algebraically, always get the answers from the calculator first. If, when you're done solving algebraically, you do not get 5, 0, and 3, negative 4, it means you made a mistake, so go back and check your work again. Now to solve algebraically, the next thing you want to do is to set the equations equal to each other. Since both equations are set equal to y, that also means that you can take and set them equal to each other. X squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 2x minus 10. Now, since this is a quadratic, meaning there's an x squared, in order to solve a quadratic, you must set it equal to 0 first. So subtract 2x from both sides, giving you x squared minus 8x plus 5 equals negative 10. Add 10 to both sides. Now your quadratic equation is x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 0. Now to solve the quadratic, you have a few options. You can either factor using trinomial factoring, you can use the quadratic formula, or you can complete the square. For this example, I will take and solve by factoring. Remember, for factoring a trinomial, you're trying to find two numbers that multiply to 15 and that add to 8. Those two numbers turn out to be negative 3 and negative 5. So x minus 3, x minus 5 equals 0. Now you're going to make a t-chart and solve for x. X minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides. So x equals 3. And x minus 5 equals 0. Add 5 to both sides. And x is equal to 5. If you look at the solutions that you got from your calculator, you will see that x equals 5 and x equals 3. So far you've done the problem correct. You're not done with this question yet until you take and solve for y. In order to solve for y, you need to take and rewrite the values of x first, which is x equals 3 and x equals 5. To solve for y, you're going to take one of the equations. I usually use the linear equation because it's shorter. Y equals 2x minus 10. And you're going to take and substitute the value of x in place. So y equals 2 times 3 minus 10, giving you y equals negative 4. You have to do the same thing on the other side, which is going to be y equals 2x minus 10. In place of the x, plug in a 5, so 2 times 5 minus 10, giving you y equals 0. So my one solution is 3, negative 4, and my other solution is 5, 0. If you look at the answers that you got earlier from the calculator, you will see that these answers match up with your solutions. So when you're asked to solve algebraically, remember, once you solve for x, you're not done. You also need to take and solve for y by using one of the two original equations, substitute in for x, and then get the y value. Let's go on to question number 2. Question number 2 says to solve algebraically and state all the values of x for which f of x is equal to g of x. Now in this question, they're only asking you to find the x values. When we were doing this graphically, f of x equals g of x means when did the parabola and the line intersect each other. When we're solving algebraically, it means to take the equation from f of x and set it equal to g of x, meaning x squared plus 3x plus 1 equals 3x plus 2. Now, before we start this algebraically, same as before, I want you to go to your calculator, type in y1 equals, y2 equals, second trace intersect, and get the answers first. When you do that, your solutions will turn out to be negative 1, and 1, 5. Now to solve this algebraically, again, you're going to see an x squared. To solve with an x squared or a quadratic, you must set the equation equal to 0 first. Minus 3x from both sides, giving you x squared. Now 3x minus 3x is 0, so you would just write x squared plus 1 equals 2. Subtract the 2 from both sides, giving you x squared minus 1 equals 0. To solve this, you can either factor or you can use the quadratic formula. To factor, you would be using dots since it's the difference of two squares. If you're choosing to factor, you would be taking the square root of x squared, which is x, the square root of 1, which is 1. So you would get x plus 1, x minus 1 equals 0. Make a t-chart. X plus 1 equals 0. So minus the 1, and x equals negative 1. X minus 1 equals 0. Add the 1. X equals positive 1. If you decided instead that you wanted to use the quadratic formula, you would take and list your a, b, and c values first. A is equal to 1, b is equal to 0, and c is equal to negative 1. Remember, the a is the number in front of the x squared, the b is the number in front of the x, and in this case there is no x, which is why b equals 0, and c is the number not connected to a variable. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. When you plug in the numbers, x equals negative b means the opposite of b, but 0 would stay the same, plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 1 all over 2 times 1. So x equals 0 plus or minus. Type the numbers underneath the radical into your calculator to get 4. So x equals 0 plus the square root of 4 over 2, which gives you x equals 1, and x equals 0 minus the square root of 4 over 2, which gives you x equals negative 1. Now in this case, the question again specifically says to solve for x. When you got the solutions from the calculator, x equals -1 and x equals 1. Those are the same answers that you got if you took and solved using the quadratic formula, or if you decided to factor. For this question, you do not need to find the y values, since the question again specifically says to only find the values of x. Now let's look at page 12. The directions on page 12 say to solve each system of equations algebraically. That means when you are solving these four equations, you must take and solve for both x and y. So make sure you do not stop after you solve for x. Before you start the questions, again, remember, get the answers from your calculator first by doing y1 equals, y2 equals, second, trace, intersect, and write down your solutions. That should help you remember that once you solve for x, you're not done until you take and you solve for y. So tonight for homework, you're going to be doing page 12. Remember to solve for x. You can either factor, use the quadratic formula, or complete the square. Also remember that you must solve for both x and y before you are done with the question. If anyone would like to message me a math joke, I will use it for the joke of the day in a later lesson. Have a nice day, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.